and visual effects companies. My name is Julia Labanova. I'm a webinar host for educational platform Skillbox. Please write your comments on lives.skillbox.ru. I would like to know if you can hear me well and if you can see me. Please write it down. And of course, I would like to know, where are you from? What is your name? And why are you so interested in CG industry? If you have been in this industry for a while, please write it down too. And if you heard about it yesterday, please let us know as well. If you have prepared some questions already for our speaker, please write them down. We will find time to answer them. Also, under the video, you can see the button. It says share. Please share this video on your favorite social media platforms so you can watch it later and share it with your best friends who would love to hear this maybe later and don't have time to do that now. So while you're doing this, I would like to remind you, what are you going to learn today? So you're going to learn about skills that you need to have to get into the industry and how the tasks of a junior, middle, and senior differ in terms of responsibility. You'll also learn where to look for the international CG communities. What are the current trends, the changes and opportunities that COVID-19 has brought? What are the prospects, career path, work in different studios, and salary? How to get into international studios, what hard skills you should have, what your portfolio should look like, what else is required. And I see that you can hear me. I see your comments. Thank you. That's mean I can continue. And I would love to introduce you our speaker. So it's CEO and founder of Archetype Media Group, entrepreneur, creative director, business consultant, motivational speaker, Oscar-winning visual effect artist, and generalist for film Gravity and nominated films such as X-Men: Days of Future Past and Deepwater Horizon. Poya Shohani. Poya, can you hear me? I'm doing great, thank you. And please let us know, what are we going to learn today? Maybe you have some adjustments. I would love to hear about them. We're so glad to have you, and we hope so too. Mhm. Mhm.
Communities are there to help you. And furthermore, I'll explain a little bit about the changes within the industry and what's happening now after COVID. So these are sort of some of the aspects I'll be covering amongst other issues that I'll be going over as well. Just to start with, I'd like to give a little bit of a background about myself, how I got into this industry, how I landed on these jobs and working on international studios. My company beginning to work on plus 20 Hollywood films so far and continuing to grow on that. So starting with myself, I initially started off as a stuntman, surprisingly. And my career was quite short. I starred in John Carter, where I was sort of doing some very small stunts, and effectively I injured myself during training. And I still had a huge passion for film and visual effects. I still wanted to somehow be involved in the process. So I started training visual effects at home by myself, and effectively I ended up taking a course at Escape Studios in London. And after this course, I began searching, going to studio after studio, searching for jobs. So it was a bit difficult at that time. I wasn't sure where I was really going to end up. And I ended up as a runner at a company called Cinesight in London. Surprisingly, I was bringing coffee to artists, cleaning their desks, and just for the first 2 months, it was quite odd for me to do that after so much training, so much education within the field. But that was my door in to the industry. That allowed me to speak to many of the producers, many of the leads within different departments, and every day I spoke to them about how I wanted to get into the industry. And slowly, surely, they gave me an opportunity to work on the visual effects of John Carter, which was the very film I injured myself on, surprisingly. And I remember the CEO of Cinesight telling me, "I'm going to take you out of the frying pan and throw you into the fire." So she really gave me an opportunity to show myself, show my skills, and prove to them that I can be a visual effects artist. My main focus at that time was to become an effects artist. So, destruction, dynamics, natural phenomena, digitally creating those. So that was my first sort of gig. I worked 12, 14, 16 hours some days, day and night, not only on producing the shots that were required, but also learning every night. I really wanted to prove everyone that this is ultimately what I want to really get involved with. And shortly after the film was released, it was a great success. Moving forward, my mentor and partner at the time pushed me onto getting involved with a film called Gravity. And the film had been in development for about 3 years at the time. Many shots going back and forth between Sandra Bullock and George Clooney, sort of reshooting many of the scenes, purely because 90% of that film was visual effects, and the characters, the actors, really had to get their facial expressions correct, so that we can generate the rest of the sort of the body movements and so on. That was a great experience. I initially didn't really think it was gonna be as big as it is, but the more I worked on it, the more we worked on it, it became a phenomenon at the time. The kind of the realism that we managed to achieve in this, it was fantastic. And working alongside Framestore, a great company and a great studio with amazing senior artists working there, and that surprised me. It won an Oscar for Best Visual Effects. Our team, Framestore's team, we all, part of that, and it was a career changer for my team and everyone else. That kind of boosted my career up to where I am now. Worked on over 20 plus films, as presenter mentioned. Got nominated twice for Deepwater Horizon and X-Men Days of Future Past for the visual effects. And our team continued to grow at AMG, and taking on bigger works from sort of commercial work all the way to films, TV series, and so forth. And now our company has 4 locations around the world. So we're located in the USA, in the UK, in Abu Dhabi, UAE, and now currently in Moscow, where we've opened up our latest branch. We are working on films of budgets of from 5 million all the way up to 60 million. They're very large films from Hollywood that we're speaking to very large producers at the moment. And recently in Moscow, we've hired roughly around 25 new artists that we are sort of beginning to train to accustom them for the way we work with Hollywood producers and Hollywood studios. And it's been a fantastic journey so far. We're very excited on hopefully being able to hire more and more artists in the future and bring them over to our studio so we can all begin working on much larger projects. And right, so let's move forward to our... So to give you a little bit more understanding about AMG, we are a collective group of producers, managers, directors, artists, supervisors from all over the world. And we are working on, as mentioned previously, feature films, post-production projects, TV and commercials. Our main aim is to create a hub of creatives and directors to sort of work together on inspiring projects. And this could be from film projects to tech projects to commercials, whatever it is. We're having a great time, and we want great people to work with us to continue to innovate the industry and make changes to the industry and have an impact. So that's what AMG is really about, and it's been about for many years now. So let's dive into how the industry works. What is visual effects ultimately? To give you a little brief understanding of what visual effects is, it's taking initially it's all about taking raw footage from wherever the project's been shot and then integrating CG elements over the video in order to enhance it, give it the vision of the director, the vision that the project really is to be. So visual effects has really changed the medium that is film from where it was before to where it is now. And we've got a little video here that I'm going to just share with you all, just to show where we've come from and where we are now. So as you can see, this film was Ben-Hur, came out in 1957. Long time ago. But as you can see here, all the crowds, everyone here is real. They hired large amounts of casts to come on board, to dress them up, have them stand there, have them acting. So way back then, this was how it was traditionally done. Now moving forward to a film called Hercules, where we worked on it in 2014. And as you can see, we don't need large crowds anymore. We have technology that's completely replaced this method, and it's given filmmakers a much more powerful tool in order to recreate their dreams, recreate exactly what it is that they want to create with minimum budget and high value quality. So it's allowed them to focus a lot more on the story and the fantasia that is there. So going back to our presentation. So as mentioned before, visual effects is primarily focused on, on feature films, on TV series and commercials. Now, especially now, it's become a huge wave into moving it towards all sorts of mediums. And it's moved out of Hollywood, really. It's moved out of just films. It's moved into many other sectors, which is something that I will explore a little bit later on. But to dive a little bit deeper into what really visual effects means in today's world. So traditionally, in a visual effects sort of pipeline in a studio, depending again on the size of the studio, but traditionally this is the kind of roles that you will begin to see. So looking here, we can see that there are 3 separate artist role departments, starting from sort of story-based to asset-based to shot-based. And what we have here is also 2 management roles, where the supervisor teams and the production team. And what I'm going to do is just give you all a little bit of an understanding of each role within each of these sectors and how they all kind of work together. So Moving forward, starting with artist role, story-based. As we can see at the top here, we have our story-based artists, so concept artists. Concept artist really is the very beginning of the process, where the artist will sit with the director or the client, and they will begin visualizing the look and feel of many of the aspects of the film. And by visualizing this, we get the type of lighting, the type of models, the type of characters, the type of character movements. All sorts of features are exposed through this concept prior to any other sort of steps being taken. And the concept artist doesn't necessarily only work within this sort of story-based segment, but is involved throughout the process, as many of the other roles that I'm going to explain are continuously involved throughout the process of the feature film being made. Moving forward to storyboard artists. Again, depending on the size of the project, you have a storyboard artist that will come on, that will begin to draw sort of each angle, each camera angle, what's happening within each shot, the type of characters, the type of effects taking place. All of these are sort of visualized in a very simple yet effective way for the director to convey to the visual effects department and to the camera department and various other departments. So again, a very crucial step prior to many of the other productions departments beginning their process. Now we have the previs artists, pre-visualization artists. This usually you find them on much larger projects, much more complex films and features that involve lots and lots of visual effects. These are usually simple yet effective grayscaled 3D visualizations of each scene, so the director can visualize how the camera is going to be moving, certain visual effects elements such as the character animations, such as the certain effects where they'll be taking place, the timing of certain events that are going to happen. All of this will be done through the pre-visualization methods. Moving forward to the asset-based artists roles, starting here with our modeler. The modeler, at this stage, they begin to work with the concept artist and see what kind of characters they need to be developing, what kind of certain other assets. It could be from vegetation to landscape to buildings. It really depends, but at this stage, the modeler starts to develop and research and develop, should we say, these kind of attributes. Moving forward to the texture artists, as you can see, they create the sort of the flat color and flat textures on the characters or on the environment, and usually you have specializations working from either character texture artists or environment texture artists, and it really splits into two categories. But in the recent years, you have some modelers that tend to do both sides, but this turns into more of a generalist form, which I will again cover at a later stage during this presentation. On the next side is our cloth TD and effects. At the very early stages, depending on the size of the project, the cloth TD will begin working with the modelers for characters. So depending how their clothes are going to be moving, there are certain attributes on certain characters. These are, again, at a very early stages, begin developing and working together to develop this look and feel that is correct to the film or the animation. And the effects themselves, effects TDs, they begin working on much bigger sort of effects, so much bigger dynamic sequences that are going to be in the film, but it takes a long time to develop the right feel, the right look, the right shade, and the right lightening through them. So these processes usually begin at a very earlier stages. Moving forward to rigging TDs, the rigging TDs, they literally create the backbone of the characters, creating the skeleton, how the limitations of each limb, how, you know, if there's an elbow, it can't extend over 180. And these features allow the animators at the later stage, which we will fall into shortly, which is the shot-based artists, allows them to be creative and focus on the realistic movements of the characters. And that's what the rigging TDs really do. Moving towards the pipeline and R&D TDs, they begin to work on problem solving. They work on the render farms. They provide certain tools for certain departments that make it easier for the creative artists to continue being creative and not worry so much about the sort of the technical aspects of the pipeline. And pipeline TDs are very, very important to the much larger companies, as they have much larger and more complex pipelines to deal with. So there'll be more issues that come up, and you really require a dedicated team to handle them. Moving towards the shot-based artists, starting with the match move and camera trackers. So this is mainly a junior role into the industry. Many juniors are hired through this side initially, and then they jump onto other departments. But this department is very crucial. What it does, it takes the 2D raw footage that has been shot on site of a project, and they convert it into 3D. So they allow sort of the CG elements to be integrated into the live action footage. So a very, very important aspect of the pipeline. Moving towards the animators. So the animators taking the characters that have been designed by the modelers and then rigged by the rigging artists. The animators are then allowed to be creative in the direction which they take based on the storyboard, based on working very closely with the director and the CG supervisor to really get the right essence of the character's movements, which we will again see at a later stage. I will show you some footage of some Pixar footage that really truly defines a great animator. Crowd TDs. So crowd TDs work very closely with animators. What they tend to do is duplicate and vary the sort of character animations we see in large crowds, in large groups. So as previously shown in Hercules, where the crowd is generated in the background, and the crowd TDs work very closely, as mentioned, with the animators to achieve this look and feel of real crowds, real movement within each sort of character is very, very unique to them. Moving towards the layout and camera artists, layout artists work very closely with the camera and match moving artists in order to sort of place their grayscale 3D models within the 3D integrated footage. So once the 2D footage has been created into a 3D footage, the layout artists begin placing the 3D objects within the sequences, within the scenes, within the shots. And this kind of gives a better understanding of whether the shot has been correctly integrated into 3D, or if there are any movements or glitches within the tracking itself. And this is a very important part of the pipeline to make sure the 3D objects remain within the 2D footage and there's no discrepancy, there's no lack, there's no jitter, so to say. Moving towards matte painters, we call them 2.5D artists, as they generally tend to create the farther background sort of elements, such as, you know, big skies, big city breaks that you see at the very end of at the very back of the shots. They continue to sort of work with concept artists, or the concept artist becomes sort of a matte painter at some point, depending on the scale of the project. The matte painter or the concept artist may be pushed to sort of doing both levels, but again, it really varies from project to project. Moving towards FX TD. So we had FX TDs at the very beginning of the project that begin to work on much larger aspects. They even begin to create certain tools for the FX artists that begin to use these tools to create certain looks and certain effects within each shot. I myself, having kind of great experience in this department, the FX TD is sort of above the normal pipeline because they tend to light their own shots. They tend to create certain models, certain part of models, or they tend to create certain other aspects of other departments in order to generate that dynamic effect that is correct and true to the natural phenomena required for the animation of feature film. But again, that varies between different projects. So much larger projects, you have very much specialized artists working on very much specialized tasks. So to give you an example, working on, for instance, Deepwater Horizon, I myself were tasked, specifically myself were tasked to create the mud effects that you see in the film, whereas the other team members were tasked more specifically to create sort of the lighting only, the shading only, and, you know, explosions or so on. So this way is a very big project, but when you get smaller and smaller projects towards sort of commercials, you have an FX TD doing a lot of the other works as well. Moving towards lighting TD. Now the lighting TD, they take the footage, the raw footage that has been shot on site, and they recreate the lighting digitally. And that allows them to pass these sort of digital lights over to the different departments, such as modeling, such as animation, such as effects, and the various other departments to get the true essence of the light within the scene once we render it. And this becomes a much easier process for the compositor, which I will shortly get to and explain what their role is. Going towards the rotoscope artists, again, a junior role into 2D, into the 2D compositing segment, where the artist is tasked with taking out each individual sort of character within each shot in order to allow the compositors to put the 3D elements behind the character or in front of the character. And these could be of many other sort of elements, not necessarily characters, but the elements that require to be moved between the background or the foreground. This is where this role really takes place. Moving towards the prep artists, again, another junior role within the industry where they are tasked with sort of cleaning the plates, making sure if there are wires attached to the actors who are jumping from one area to another, or there's an explosion, there's wires attached to the stuntmen and being pushed back. These are all cleaned up by the prep artists and then further sent over to the compositor, which, as you can see, we call them the finisher. They take all the aspects from, you know, all the renders, all of the work done from all the other departments and combine them into under each shot and integrate these elements into this shot in order to make it look realistic, so that you won't be able to tell the difference between what is real and what is CGI. Now, that's, again, that really comes down to how great of a compositor you really are. As some films you will see, sometimes the compositing is not so great and it's a very clear distinction between the characters and what is not real and what is CGI, and others where it's very seamless. So moving towards more managerial roles, as you can see, it's starting with the production team. So with the line producer. Line producers are very busy. They are sort of the right-hand individual to the producer, which is on set working closely with the director. And they are sometimes working on certain amounts of budget as well. But again, it depends on the level of project that they're working on. So very, very busy individuals usually. Production managers or supervisor, a very big role, usually split between two segments. So you have one production manager that usually works at the front end of the project. So they tend to deal with the stories, the assets, and the layout. And you have another project manager that will be working behind the on the back end. So that will be more of the sort of the effects, the compositing, and sort of the finishing segments of the project. Now usually they have about two assistants, different types of assistants. So one is the production assistant, and the production assistant is primarily there to make sure the the cast and crew are there, the traveling of different perhaps artists or casts that need to go from one location to another, organizing the organizers of the project themselves, really. But they're really there to assist the project managers to make sure that they get all the help that they need. Another assistant that comes in are the coordinators. Now, the coordinators help in terms of scheduling, making sure artists and different departments within the visual effects are on time. They're meeting the deadlines that are required, that are set by the VFX supervisor and the production manager. So again, very busy individuals, ensuring everything is sort of delivered on time. So moving towards runners. Now, runners, in much larger studios, you see much more of them. In fact, there's a whole dedicated department for them, where runners, where I was myself, you kind of help the artists minimize the amount of time they spend going out looking for food, going clients, when they're in meetings, to bring them food. At the same time, these are sort of very entry level into studios, where you're also trained at the same time. So you sort of deal with these tasks that are to help production continue being on time. At the same time, they are training you in the background to make sure effectively you will become part of the team at one point. Moving towards the supervisor teams. Supervisors, so visual effects supervisor, very important aspect of the production. Visual effects supervisors, they come from many years of experience. They usually they're very technical and artistically savvy, so they work very closely with the director or the production managers to make sure that the quality of visual effects that is shown to the director is that exactly the standards that is required. So without the approval of the visual effects supervisor, nothing is really shown ever to the directors. Usually the visual effects supervisor will go on site and ensure anything that is captured that is for visual effects is captured in the right way, with all the right data that is required to be captured for the visual effects artists to do their jobs more smoothly. And they also tend to create the scheduling that is required for the visual effects departments to carry out the works that they do. Again, depending on the size of the project, you may have more specialized sort of supervisors, but generally you'll have one visual effects supervisor working very heavily and very closely with the director to get the right vision of the visuals that are required. Moving towards the CG supervisor, they work again very closely with the VFX supervisor. They're sort of but what they mainly are there to do is to make sure that everything is onto schedule. They work closely with the coordinators to make sure everything is sort of delivered on time. They contribute, as said here, they contribute to the technical aspects of the visual effects that are executed properly. So again, very important aspect of the pipeline. Moving towards leads. Now, leads are senior artists within each of their own departments. Now, leads, they are in charge of making sure the rest of the artists are creating the style and the look and feel of what the visual effects supervisor has initially set. They're in charge of sort of having meetings with the VFX supervisor, sometimes even being there where the client is, again, depending on the size of the project. Leads are, again, very artistically and technically savvy, depending on the department that they are specializing in. So just to explain a little bit further about the specialist and generalist. So you may hear this within the industry a lot. Specialists, and many people tend to nowadays specialize more because there are bigger feature films. There's much more requirements for films. So it's usually the best way to start within the industry, I would say, is to start as a specialist, and you gradually become a generalist as you begin to have a much better understanding of the pipeline. So what we have here are just two videos just to show you the differences between a specialist and a generalist. So just to go back before we go here, just gonna jump onto this. Have to wait primarily for these to go. So as we can see here, a modeler would generally come on board and they would model very specific sort of characters. You'll have a series of modelers and they would all specialize in different types of modeling, from hard surface to character modeling. And as you can see, this is much more specialized. So this is pretty much all you would work on throughout the film. You would either have characters to work on, environments to create, certain aspects, certain features on the characters that you need to create. So that becomes much more specialized, and you would spend years and years and years to really master your craft, as this individual has. Nicholas Sievers, one of great artists. As you can see, he's worked on many feature films and specialized only on creating these fantastic models. Now, moving towards a more generalist show reel. So I'll show you our friend Adrian Lambert's reel, where he's created some of the big aspects of Star Wars. As you can see, Rise of Skywalker. So he would generate all of these pieces. He would bring all these pieces together, from the modeling to the animation of the crafts to the certain effects to the lighting, the mood. And this is more of a generalist, but this takes a lot more time to master. And I wouldn't really recommend, if you're starting off within the industry, to come on straight away and say, I'm a generalist, unless you have a very big portfolio to show, some of your own, perhaps short films that you've created in your own time. But I wouldn't really recommend it as a way to really dive into the industry. So let's go back and continue with this. So moving forward, as you can see here, specialists tend to work more on sort of much larger feature film projects, where you'll be required to just focus your attention more on specific tasks. So that's given whether that's effects, modeling, lighting, whatever department you're in, that'll be your specialization. They give you a very specific task within that role to begin your workings. Now, generalists, you'll tend to find them more in sort of commercial studios, more bespoke, smaller studios, where one individual will be tasked to create the layout, to create the effects, to create the lighting, sometimes even do the modeling and so on. So you'll find these individuals more in sort of smaller studios. What I have also here is just some quotes that I gathered from our friends in the industry from sort of different companies. Let's start with our friend from MPC, Matt Leonard. As he says, generalists or specialists can often come down to how an individual company works. However, knowing the whole visual effects picture will help you understand the overall process and work more effectively with other departments. Now, that's very true. Even as a specialist, you still need to have a great understanding of what it means, what each sort of department works and how all of these departments come together. So as a modeler, you really need to understand what it means to, how you need to create your model so that the animators or the rigging artists or the texture artists can finalize their process based on your work. So without this understanding, you'll create models that may look great, but other departments may not be able to work with that model. So then these are some attributes you really need to take into consideration. Moving towards our other friend, Phil Dobry at Jellyfish Pictures. A generalist will thrive in small companies or departments, working in short form work where there are little jobs with quick turnarounds. Specialists can fit into larger teams where the pipeline becomes more complex. Journalists who can handle most skills are invaluable, but make sure if you label yourself a journalist, you really can handle what you claim extremely well. And now this goes back to what I said previously about you labeling yourself as a generalist. You really have to be able to deliver on what you say. Now, the industry is small and it's growing, but it's still fairly a small industry. Everyone tends to know each other. Everyone tends to speak to each other, especially companies between companies. There's a lot of talk there. So if you come across as someone that you are not, if you're a generalist and you're not actually a generalist, you can't perform the tasks that are required of you, this will look bad on you. So I highly recommend you to take your time as a specialist and to really understand the pipeline, perhaps to begin create some personal projects that require you to dive into other departments. Let's move to what our friend Silen Shevket had said at MPC Film. The best team is made up of a mix of generalists and specialists, so you can all work together to get the highest quality results with the best possible workflows. There's always another or different way to solve a problem in visual effects, and the more approaches you're aware of, and the more informed and impressive the final output will be. And that's very, very true. There is not one way to achieve one effect or any type of visual effect you're trying to achieve. There are usually multitudes of ways to achieving this, especially now with the amount of softwares and where technology is really going. Possibilities of creating the same look and feel can be achieved in many, many different ways. And this comes from experience. This comes from teaching yourself daily. And another part of this comes from the teamwork. That is, again, I will dive into one of the most essential needs of a great visual effects artist is to be able to communicate and to work with other visual effects artists and not to think of it as a challenge. You're not in an environment where you're in competition with anyone. You're here to create the best visuals, best art, should we say, that you can. And there are seniors and there are seniors above those seniors that are always there to help. Everyone understands where the juniors are coming from. And it's a very big industry in the sense that there are just so many things to learn, so many things to take into consideration. Moving forward, what you should know to get into the industry. Now, there are many aspects to what you really need to know to become a great artist, and many of them you develop over a certain period of time. You don't necessarily need to have all of these attributes in order to really get in, but just diving in, starting with number one, is beginning to learn some of the more prominent 3D softwares within the industry. That may be Maya, Houdini, or Nuke. These three are right now the biggest softwares in all the industry. 98% of all the studios around the world are using these three softwares to achieve many of the effects that you see on, visual effects that you see on many feature films. They obviously integrate their own programs, their own pipelines based on these, and they may use some other components, some other softwares to achieve other looks and feels, but these three are primary. So if you're starting off within the industry, I highly recommend you to get your hands on one of these three and begin learning. Moving forward, as I said, starting as a specialist gives you a much bigger opportunity to dive into projects and allows you to begin working in teams. And when you begin working in a team, it really opens your horizons in terms of you becoming a better visual effects artist, because you begin to see how other visual effects artists achieve different looks, whether it's modeling, texturing, animating, or effects or lighting. You have a team there that's willing to help you, to give you these skills that they've learned so that you can take on these skills and begin creating your own new set of skills based on the previous skills that you've learned. So that's definitely number two. Moving towards number three, as you said, kind of covered it previously, is again, start as a specialist, start somewhere small. Don't make it too big for yourself. Don't think that this is going to be an easy ride in a way. I mean, it's going to be fun. You're going to have a great time, but at the same time, it's not going to be an easy ride. Expect lots of sort of hard works, lots of expectations to come through as you begin to sort of build your career. Moving towards number 4 is investing your time in learning. I cannot advise you more than what I'm saying to you now about learning, self-learning, asking others, communicating with other senior artists about things that you don't understand, and try not to take on huge amounts of works. Try to really pay attention to the detail, but more importantly, self-learning can get you from here to here. And that's really been my experience, many of the experience of the fantastic artists that I've managed to work with. Other things that you'll definitely need to know are sort of comprising of what the list I have here is sort of a basic understanding of all of these, or a mixture of these, I would say, would really help you become a much better artist. You know, starting with sort of composition and lighting, very important. So you have to really be have a huge passion for films, which kind of jumps into our number 6, but you know, we will get there. Composition and lighting is a very important part of visual effects, because you have to understand how your model is going to be lit, how your effects are going to be lit to achieve that realism, or achieve the kind of the style that is set out by the director and visual effects supervisor. Moving towards visual aesthetics. Now, there is a little video here that I will share with you just to show you what I mean by visual aesthetics. So in film, visual aesthetics is a very, very crucial part of a film. How each character is uniquely identified, how each scene is uniquely identified, how each effects is has its kind of unique aesthetics to it, the look and feel of that. So I'm not going to run through the entirety of this, but what you can see, you know, these are some visually important elements that feature films tend to take place. Now, you don't need to be a master at this, but depending on what department you're really jumping into, so for instance, if it's compositing, then visual aesthetics becomes something very important for you. But just as a general artist, it's better to have a good understanding of what it really means to have good visual aesthetics in films. This would really thrive in your career, later stages in your career, trying to understand this. Moving towards drawing. Now, I'm not asking for you to become, you know, Picasso or Leonardo da Vinci, but you need to have some basic understanding of drawing. Become a good artist, you know, in your own right, an artist that you can visually take a scene and just draw it, even if it's in a very basic manner, but to have that understanding of drawing, being you're an artist, end of the day, you're a visual effects artist, but to be a better visual effects artist, sometimes it just, you know, it takes that little bit of an extra to be able to draw something, visualize it in your mind, and then create it. And this usually helps many of the artists create the kind of, especially in effects or in modeling, this really helps artists achieve a better look and feel for what they're creating. Sculpture and anatomy. This really falls under modelers, animators, especially character features. You really need to have a basic, great understanding of the human anatomy or animal anatomy, depending on what the project is. Now, I'm going to show you a little quick video of one of the world's famous animators who worked with Disney for numerous years and has created many of the lovable characters that we all have seen and loved today. Glenn Keans. So these are just some of the things that he mentions are the importance of taking into consideration about how you're visualizing what you're creating, how he comes up with the characters that he does, the type of features that he gives to them, the uniqueness. These are all based on the anatomy and understanding of the anatomy that he has. So I hope that I can share this presentation afterwards, where you can also sit down and see these videos for yourselves and take inspiration from these grandmasters within the industry. Moving forward. So mechanics and movement. Now, this is something very important. It's not just about the anatomy, but also understanding how the anatomy works in conjunction to animation. As we can see here at Pixar Soul, the realism that is captured in the movement of the fingers when they're playing the piano is hyperreal. It's amazing. This is a master at its best. And as you can see, the reference that they had, what they're able to work with, these are very important attributes to just have a basic understanding. If you're not in animation or if you're not in modeling, you still need to have a basic understanding of these and how this kind of works. And this helps you at later stages throughout your career. So moving forward towards passion for films. You need to have, I haven't met a single visual effects artist that hasn't had a humongous amount of passion for films, from very old films to new films. And they become very, very critical. They become very big critics themselves about what makes a good feature film. And I highly recommend, if you're as a junior and you're just jumping in, to watch plenty of films, but don't just watch them. Watch them, trying to analyze them, try to analyze the aesthetics of it, try to analyze the animation, how the animation was achieved. Perhaps do some background research on how this film that's starting, I don't know, from Avengers, how the Avengers were achieved, to more modern, where we talk about The Mandalorian, which was sort of done virtual production, but we will get more into that at a later stage during this. Towards maths and physics. Now, I'm not asking everyone to really get into this, but if you're becoming an effects artist or effects TD or animators or pipeline TD, you need to have a basic understanding of maths. And certainly when it comes to effects, creating natural phenomena, you really need to have a good understanding of physics in the world. To create natural phenomena is to study the world, study the events, study real life things that happen, and see the timing in which it takes place for certain things to be achieved. The attention to detail is one of the most important features, I would say, one of the most important personal developments that you should really look into is observation and attention to detail. Number 8, teamwork. And we've covered this before, but you really need to be a team player in order to achieve in order to climb the ladder, I would say, of your visual effects career. You cannot become a senior without having good communication skills, without being able to work with other artists to achieve the looks and feels that the director will require of you, the visual effects supervisor will require of you. Teamwork is essential. And finally, patience. You have no idea how big patience goes in the visual effects. We are working with machines, big processing machines, big farms, and there are usually many things that can go wrong. Your machine can crash because you've overloaded it with too many pixels, too many voxels, too much resolution on your effects. These can really destroy your scene, and you could lose hours of work. And I've seen many people, from juniors to seniors, just completely lose it, get up from their workstations and walk away. Without patience, within an hour, I'm pretty sure you'll be throwing your computer or laptop out of the window. It's a very big essence of being a good visual effects artist, is building your patience. And another part of that comes with working with directors or producers. Sometimes they don't understand what it really means to create the effects, the visual effects that you're working on. And some of the comments that come back to you may surprise you, may not be what you expected to hear, but you need to have a great deal of patience to take that and understand that it's just feedback. And it's nothing more than just feedback for your work, that they just want to make sure that they get exactly what they have in mind. And it's your job as a visual effects artist to accompany that, to make sure that that is achieved, and not for you to storm out saying anything that could damage your career or your reputation. So moving towards more understanding of the roles and responsibilities of a junior to seniors, starting with sort of, we're going to jump into a junior level, and I'll give you a basic understanding of the sort of salaries you'll also be expecting, as well as responsibilities you'll be taking on. So as a junior, generally you come on board to take on very small but effective tasks within the department that you're in. So let's take, for instance, effects, where you come in as a junior effects artist. You'll be given, very small jobs to perhaps take a tool that's already been created and by another sort of senior effects TD, and you take this tool and just take each shot and generate the effects that's required based on this tool and this sort of understanding that the senior artist will give to you. And let's look at, for instance, when I worked on Into the Storm at Cinesite. We were working with certain juniors at the time as well, and we created certain effects that we then passed over to the juniors, and juniors would sometimes do effects layout. There'll be effects that have already been created, and what they need to do is go into the scene and place it into the correct sort of area of the scene, and perhaps add some lighting or shading that's already been created by the shading artist. So a junior role is to help and assist the mid-level and senior artists sort of in bigger tasks and bigger shots that they are working on. Mid-level, you're closer. Mid-level, we kind of have two ranges, I would say. You're either mid-junior, so you're at the sort of a junior level that's transitioning into being mid, or you're a mid-senior where you've spent enough time as a mid and you become sort of a mid-senior, and you're given various different responsibilities depending on the amount of years of experience you have. So as a mid-level, you have similar tasks to that of a junior, where you'll be taking certain tasks from your more senior artist above you, so that being the senior artist or the VFX supervisor or the lead. And you'll be working with different departments to sort of achieve the look and feel that is required. But you'll also be supervising juniors in that level, sort of helping them achieve the look they need to, and maybe they help you achieve certain looks depending on how much work you have. You may decide to sort of split that work with a junior and then supervise that junior to achieve the look and feel. Moving towards more senior lines, seniors, usually after about 6 years, 5-6 years, you become more of a senior, where you'll take on much bigger roles. You'll be given much harder shots and tasks to sort of complete, and you'll be expected to start quite early on in the project. Sometimes they bring seniors on later in the project to sort of finish tasks that haven't been finished previously, to sort of jump on and start churning out these shots and these visual effects elements that are required. So a senior artist, as we will dive deeper into their responsibilities shortly. But let's begin with, let's jump back into sort of the junior mid-level responsibilities and salary expectations. Now, many of these sort of salaries are pre-COVID expectations. During COVID, there's been huge amounts of sort of changes within the industry, which I will further get to. But you can still expect to see some of these sort of salaries, depending where you are in the world, depending what studio you're working with, and what their sort of conditions are currently based on what's happened to them during COVID. But as you can see, the junior to mid-level responsibilities, managing their own workload with visual effects production teams and their leads, generating required. So working on time meeting the deadlines is a very crucial part of a visual effects artist. Now, whether you're a junior or you're a senior, Doesn't matter. You really need to learn about your timekeeping, how much you're spending time on each shot, on each effect, each element that you're working on. You need to time manage yourself, and that's something I can take to all the juniors out there or mid-level artists. Is the more you can understand about your time management and how you manage that, the better of an artist you become, and the closer to a seniority you will get to. As we can see here, in terms of salary expectations with the US, starting with $22,000, which roughly comes out about £17,000 and $31,000 in Australian. That's kind of where you would be expecting to start off. And again, these are sort of pre-COVID salaries that you'd be looking towards. And as you become more mid-level, more sort of mid-range, you tend to move towards the $52,000 and the £40,000 and the 74,000 Australian dollars, sort of. But again, depending on which studio you're working at and what the budget for the project that they have currently. It also depends what time in the project you join the company. Sometimes we would jump into a project at near the end of the project. So you will have much more responsibilities, less of a time to create the works that you're doing. So your rate may go slightly higher, depending, again, what you're tasked with and where you find yourself. Moving towards more senior level responsibilities and salaries expectations. As an animation experience, visual effects artists have an key eye. I mean, really, it depends on which department you're in, but you need to develop an artistic eye for that department. So you really need to become a master of what you're doing within that department. Your responsibilities jump from, understanding technically how things are done, how the entire pipeline is sort of comes together for you to work very closely with the art lead or other artists in other departments to achieve the look and feel of this. Usually you'll be given a very hard task, a very definitive task to work on. And you'll be also mentoring some of the mid-level or the juniors to assist you in creating certain shots and certain elements. At a senior level, your time management, you should be a master at it. You should really understand the various different processes that it takes to create a certain element, how long it takes to create those elements, and managing your time is key. So as a senior visual effects artist, these are kind of some of the elements that are very crucial. Now, looking at the salary expectations, we're looking at, yes, as you can see, $67,000 which corresponds to £52,000, and again corresponds to sort of 95,000 Australian dollars. This is sort of mid-junior. Is where you'll be expecting to sort of get these sort of salaries. And then when you move towards much more seniority, I would say, I don't know, 7-8 years of experience or a little bit more, you gradually climb the ladder of salaries a little bit more in Western production studios. So as you can see, moving towards sort of $100,000 to £78,000, which corresponds to 140,000 Australian dollars. Now, moving towards more senior management levels, you'll be expected, your responsibilities quadruple, because you'll be in charge of scheduling, you'll be in charge of allocating tasks to the artist, you'll be in charge of overlooking several departments, you'll be in charge of being on set, making sure all the elements are captured correctly so that the visual effects team can begin working on these elements smoothly. You'll be working very closely with the director. So again, depending on the level of project, how big the project is, your involvement as supervisor really increases. So the smaller the company, I would say the bigger your responsibilities, because there's much more to account for. Again, moving towards more bigger feature films, a visual effects supervisor would have 9-10 years experience, even more. Some studios don't even look at you unless you have 12-15 years. I mean, if you look at Pixar, you start as a mid-level, should we say, artist. After you've reached maybe over 10 years of experience, when you join them, you still become a mid-level for them, because they have such a strong base of artists, such a strong pipeline, and such a unique way of working, that there's still so much more for you to learn as an artist, or you think you're a VFX supervisor in many other studios, but you'll be joining them on a sort of a mid-level artist. But again, that really depends on you as an artist, as a supervisor, and how good you are, kind of career you've built over a certain period of time. Keeping an eye, so yes, self-driven. A great supervisor, many of the great supervisors that I've worked for continue to train themselves every day. They learn every day, they don't stop. They are passionate about what they're doing, passionate about their department, and achieving that final look of what the director really wants. And you also have to be a great team player. So being a supervisor means you have mastered the skills of communication, mastered the skills of teamwork. So you have to be able to motivate your team, motivate the various different departments, and also continue to keep the client happy when things can be going very wrong behind you in the studio. Certain pipelines could be really affecting the progress of the project, but you need to be able to communicate this verbally in a very effective manner towards the team, and what they need to do, and towards the client, and what that's going to be achieved. So moving towards the communities that I wanted to sort of recommend for all of the juniors, mid-level or seniors, it really doesn't matter where you're on the spectrum. But there are so many communities out there that are here to help. They're there to not to challenge you, not to compete with you in any way, but there to help. Many visual effects supervisors and seniors, mid-level artists are in these communities, and they're constantly talking to each other about how to achieve the different elements that they require in their department. And you're never alone. Never feel that you're alone in these in this career, in this path that you've taken. So starting with the rookies are a great community for junior artists to join. A great collaborative community where they're there to help you constantly with what you want to achieve and the looks and feels that you want to go for. Moving towards 3D Total, they've been around a long time. Since 1999, they've been around a long time. So they have very big communities, big seniority levels there, and great level of advice that they can give you. So whether you're working on a feature, a commercial, TV series, or your own personal projects, you have big communities that are there to assist you with making sure you get the best quality of your work. ArtStation I'd highly recommend any artist out there to begin creating an ArtStation profile. This is a great way for you to share your profile and what you've done, your experience, and your the elements that you're creating with many of the studios. You know, they'd require some sort of a portfolio, and you can begin building a portfolio on ArtStation. So highly recommend it. Animation World Network is a great place for animators to join. You can find advice on many other departments as well. They are one of the biggest out there. They've been around for a very long time, and as you can see, they're all over 151 countries. Reddit has very specialized, unique forums for visual effects. They really do help in if you're stuck on certain elements, stuck on certain things, Reddit would be a great place for you to go and explain your problem, and you'll get great feedback from great artists, giving you great advice on how to achieve certain elements. Moving towards Effects Guide, again, they've been around a long time. Big communities, you can register on their news, and they regularly send out great tips and tricks on sort of different departments and different fields. So these are just some of the communities. These aren't all of them, but you will find that you're not alone, and in whatever effect or whatever visual effect element you're working on, there's always a community there to help you achieve the best of what you can do. Now, moving towards sort of after COVID, and what's really happened to the visual effects community, there's been huge changes, very, very big changes in the industry, from the virtual production capabilities that have come, sort of replacing what that is of green screening, making production much more streamlined. So virtual productions, as you've seen on The Mandalorian, they put big screens, big LCD screens behind the characters, where the visual effects is actually done prior to the sort of the post-production side of it. So we create many of the elements, many of the environment elements are created so that they can be shown on these screens, and we can get true reflections on the characters, true lighting on the characters. So these elements are very important and are beginning to replace many of the traditional aspects and traditional pipeline that was visual effects prior to this. So expect much more changes, and I would say we'll get to Unreal shortly. And many of the companies during, us, AMG being one of them, has been greatly affected by COVID, and we had to change many of our operations, from hiring artists from all around the world and bringing them to one place to work. Now we're working with artists from around the world, with the comfort of their homes. We provide cloud-based workstations for them, where they have access to 90 core or 60 core plus processing workstations, and they can achieve the same amount of work they've been able to achieve in studio at home while being with their families. And so there has been great innovations and great changes in the visual effects productions and visual effects studios. Many studios have had difficulty sort of adapting to this. Depending on how big the studios are, they're spending millions and millions of dollars to sort of make these changes. But many smaller studios have found it easier to sort of adapt themselves to this style of working, and it's working very well now. Moving towards sort of Unreal Engine, which is really taking over the industry and replacing many of the tools. Many of the traditional ways we used to achieve the elements that we used to do. So, for instance, taking on the realism, sort of creating environments, hyper-realistic environment. As you can see in The Mandalorian, the background, the environment was all created on and rendered on Unreal, and we get an Unreal 5, especially now recently. You're able to in real time render up to about, I think, 1 billion textures in one go. So the engine behind Unreal is creating a new pathway for visual effects artists to achieve great feats that were before would take a much longer period of time. So I would highly recommend any artists out there, again, it doesn't matter where you fit on the spectrum of seniority, to jump onto learning about Unreal Engine, because it is going to change the industry. It is really there to help you create the vision that you have in mind much easier. So there's much more to be said on that, but I'm not going to dive too deep into it. I think what I've said is great for Unreal, but I cannot recommend it enough to everyone out there. Some of the best companies to work for, and some companies that we have worked with as well. These are very, very big companies. Obviously, I would like to say AMG, we are fantastic ourselves, but these companies have been around for a long time, and the works that they've done is outstanding. So Frame Store, where initially Gravity was created, and many other fantastic films, Warhorse. Moving towards Animal Logic, based out in Australia. They are incredibly creative individuals who work there. They've worked on, such as Lego Batman, Pete Rabbit, and many other fantastic feature animations that you have seen is come out of Animal Logic. Weta Digital, you really don't need to say much about them. They've worked on from Lord of the Rings to Avatar. Some of the biggest films out there in the last 2 decades have really come out of this studio, where Peter Jackson has been working heavily on, as well as James Cameron. MPC, again, another large studio. Their work is outstanding. The works that they do on many of the feature films that has come out in the last decade has been phenomenal. And I know many of the commercials that come out in the West are also produced by MPC, are with great talent behind them. Double Negative, primarily, again, focused on creating feature films, but huge studio with great creatives working there. As many as all of these studios have. And Industrial Light and Magic, this speaks for itself. Star Wars and many of the great films, again, that have been created in the last 2 decades have come out from this studio alone. But many of these studios, they work together. They work in conjunction together to create the amazing feature films that you see. So it's not that one company takes on the entirety of a film. It's usually a handful of companies that come together to create these big features. How to get into foreign studios. There are many elements on how you can promote yourself to get into these bigger studios and to begin working with these bigger studios that perhaps not like AMG have created a place here in Russia or in many other countries, but they are prominently big in the US, in the UK, or in Canada, or other places in the world. But there are some pointers that I can really give to you here that will help. One of them being English is, spoken by 90% of the people in the industry, but you don't need to be amazing at it. You just need to have a good understanding of the language itself. Would really help you dive deeper into these companies. Another thing is showing your true strength. Now, going back to specialist and generalist sort of viewpoints, I don't mean for you to show a whole feature film or a short film that you created just to show your skills. You can create 2 or 3 fantastic shots. They can be very small, but your attention to detail in whatever field that you're really going after, whether that's modeling, so you create 3, 4, 5 fantastically detailed and done correctly, so that you can show that how other departments can benefit from your from the models you created. Or if it's lighting, or if it's effects, focus your attention on the small details. So just create a couple of shots that you can really focus on. You don't need to create a series of small short films for you to, for people to take notice of your work. Connecting on various different social platforms. Now there are growing number of social media platforms. So I would, start with Facebook or LinkedIn. LinkedIn has become one of the primary places where many of the visual effects artists that I know have been able to find work. And many of the studios, including our own studio, they post jobs, they post competitions, they post many things that you as an artist, a junior artist, or depending where your seniority is, you can really get involved and begin speaking to the recruiters or the producers involved in these studios. Dive into some of the communities that I shared with you previously on the last slide. They put some competitions. And some of the great ways for you to get recognized is to jump in and join these competitions, whether it is to create realistic lighting, create realistic look and feel of a character. The competition really varies, but a great way to get yourself noticed is to jump on and don't be afraid to put yourself out there. So that kind of covers this slide. Amongst all things, don't forget to have fun. It can be a very daunting experience to try to get yourself in there. You're working with some incredibly talented individuals. You end up working on some incredible films and projects that will change your life. But amongst all of this, visual effects artists, we have a lot of fun. There's a lot of banter amongst artists. There's lots of creative works that goes on behind scenes. There's a real sense of community, and for you to be known, for you to build a good career, is for you to be able to socialize, is for you to be able to share your experiences with other artists. Don't feel like you're in a competition. Never feel like you're in a competition when it comes to working on projects. Know that everyone there is working with the same angle as you. They just want to do the best that they can. So never feel like you're competing against anyone in your own team. If you ever do, I would highly recommend you to talk to a senior. They would really talk to you and let you know what it's really all about, that it's not about the competition. We used to have, they don't do it so much anymore. We used to do big rap parties. So after every sort of project was done, the visual effects studio would host a very big party with the director of the film. And, this takes me back to when I worked on, for instance, John Carter or Gravity. We had huge parties where the studio would bring food and drinks, and they would hire a very big location. And you get to speak and talk to many of the actors or the cast and crew on the film, and get to meet other studios that have been working on the same project as you have. So you get to expand your network that way as well. Don't forget, it is a professional place. As much as it can be fun, many studios provide you with great fun sort of activities. So for instance, taking you towards like Animal Logic, where they have you can join a fine arts class during your lunch breaks or during certain periods during the day. You can join sports activities. You can join. There are many social groups that are formed usually in bigger studios. This just really encouraged the social aspect of the visual effects community. So I highly recommend you to join them. Have fun while you're creating immensely amazing work. And don't forget to celebrate every small task that you do and you achieve it and is well achieved and is well received by the director and well received by the VFX supervisor. Know that you've done a great job. So that's all really I have to say so far for this presentation. And I hope you've all enjoyed this. I hope I've given you some knowledge that perhaps you didn't know, or increase the knowledge on what you've already known about the visual effects pipeline. I hope you can sort of join me and join us in the future of AMG. I hope you can begin to follow us and see our activities. We'll be posting more jobs as well on various different social media platforms. So I hope to hear from you all, and I hope you had a great time like I did giving you this presentation. Thank you.
We for sure had a great time with you, Poya. Thank you so much. There's such a fire in your eyes, and you're so passionate about what you do. And I'm sure you can talk about it forever. That's great.
I really
great to hear you.
Thank you.
And we have a lot of comments, so I combined them into some questions, and you answered a few already. You answered a question about English language. It's a very crucial moment. You answered that for Galina. Galina, please write us your comment if you understand everything. And how can we help you with English? We would love to. We have some programs in Skillbooks for sure. And here is another question from Darina. It's kind of she put exclamation mark at the end. She said, it's so hard to get into the foreign industry, foreign companies, she meant. And our friends who are watching us right now, they just had a discussion. There's the longest discussion I picked. They were talking about how small this industry is in Russia, and how they would be happy to work in foreign companies for sure, or to be like to promote this industry here in Russia more.
Yeah.
And so can you give them these kind of solutions or some advice on how to get to foreign companies besides getting the language? Is it possible? Let's tell them if it's possible.
It's absolutely possible. I mean, I've worked with artists that they've had very basic understanding. We really had to show them what we wanted, more visually show them. But because they were such great artists, so it really comes down to how great of an artist you are and how well you can sell yourself. You know, this going back to Hollywood in itself, you find actors that can barely speak and they end up on set on a very big budget films because they are great actors and they can convey a certain mood. So in the same sense of visual effects, as an artist, you can get into foreign studios without necessarily knowing too much English. I mean, when I said English is just the very basics that you can, communicate. The very basics of English would really help you get onto foreign studios. But your work as an artist can speak 1,000 words more than you trying to become a great English speaker. I would say reaching out right now with the power of social media. So if you feel trapped in a certain, if you feel that you can't get out of the country you're in, but you really want to exceed and get out working with other studios in foreign countries, social media is your power, is your tool to really get yourself out, connect to producers, find out. One of the very simple things is you look at a visual effects film and you can pick out names at the very end in the cast, for instance, who was involved in which company and what their role was. So if you can see the producers' names or the HR names and the recruiters, I would jump on and find those names and try to find them on social media. I mean, LinkedIn.
That's some good advice. Wow.
LinkedIn right now is a very powerful tool. Yeah.
That's the best. Yeah, it's very simple, obvious, but I even didn't think about it. So it was for Darina and Artyom because they were talking about it during your presentation
Right.
and commenting a lot about this. So also, I love this exclamation mark from Roman. He said, when you were talking about departments, he said, so many departments. That's why movies are so expensive because there's so many people involved. Thank you, Roman. And they were talking with Artyom. I was reading, guys. I know you're watching us. And they're curious about what is the reason for you to open a branch in Moscow? Why did you do that?
So one of the reasons we did that is the world is, you have artists, fantastic artists here. Firstly, there are fantastic artists everywhere in any country, regardless of, whatever region. I mean, personally, I'm from Iran originally, but even in Iran, we have amazing artists that don't get the recognition that they deserve. And I don't see why we should be focused more on Western artists or Western productions where we can create the same element, the same look and feel, if not better to some extent, in other countries, and give the talent there the experience of working on these feature films. And that's one of the reasons we came here, is because previously I'd worked with many Russian artists on various different projects.
Wow.
I worked in Bulgaria with Worldwide Effects for Olympus Has Fallen, so AMG, we worked with them. And there were some phenomenal artists that I myself was shocked that they didn't have the recognition within the industry that they needed. So I always told myself after that film that when our company reaches a certain level, that we can begin to open up our branches out in these countries and bring production from Hollywood or from any other studio that has very big production, and give these people the opportunity to show their work and show their talent. So this is one of the main reasons we opened up shop here, is to work with the brilliant talent that is already here and give them light and allow them to spread their wings into other studios. So we hope to be a beacon of help, a beacon that we can really expand the visual effects network, and to show everyone that everyone has an equal ground in getting their hands into this industry.
Wow, I think we answered the questions completely. For Roman and Artyom, please, dear watchers, write it down, your comments, if it was satisfying for you. And of course, we would like to know the feedback. And thank you for answering, Poya. And I'm personally curious. I love the story I heard in the beginning. So you started as a stuntman, and then you got noticed, yes? And how did it happen? What kind of was in you that was this, what's her name? This woman, she saw in you this talent?
From Cinecite, yes. So it was consistency and persistence, to be honest with you. When I have my mind fixed on something, for instance, when after I graduated from Escape Studios, which is based in London, I spent another further 5 months just locked myself in a room, really.
Wow.
I had little to no income at the time, but I self-taught myself so much. I studied very hard, and I went after, I think, probably over 50 studios that I visited, knocked on every one of their doors. I gave them my resume. You know, at the time it was with CD or a USB, printed them off. Every day I would go to these studios and ask for a position, a role. And when I was given a runner position at Cinecite, of course I was a little bit, I've done all of this work only to land as a runner. But that didn't stop me from trying to speak to the heads of department. So, head of department of effects. So effects was where I really wanted to get involved with. So I remember his name is Louis, and every day I would speak to Louis and the effects team about, while I would bring them coffee, or I would clean their desks, or bring them sandwiches for lunch or dinner, I would speak to them. What are you doing? Are you using this technique, this technique?
Wow.
And it got to a point where there was a junior position available, and the head of department, Louis, spoke to the CEO and said, look, this kid clearly he's interested and he knows what he's talking about. Let's give him a chance.
Wow.
And they gave me a chance. I'm forever grateful to them for doing so, because hard work pays off. I cannot express that enough to audiences out there, that if you want to get to somewhere, you have to put in the work. And that's really what I did. And be persistent with it. You want something, go after it. Don't be shy. Life is too short for that. Yeah.
For sure, too short. And it's a perfect story of combination of hard skills and the soft skills, because if you know something perfect but you can't communicate and to find a way with Louis and Theo, it doesn't matter how much you can do. Wow, that's impressive. Very, very great story. Thanks for sharing. Wow, what an example. It's an inspiration.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, so I know there are a lot of comments, but dear friends, if you have more questions, please ask. And it says, basic level of skills you have to get a job in a huge company. It's a question from Daria. Thanks, Daria, for question.
Sure. It's a basic skill. So again, it depends on the department you're really going after. This comes down to the specialist to generalist. Again, you have to try to specialize yourself. If you are, for instance, you're in 2D, you're a storyboard artist, or starting there, you need to, obviously, as a storyboard artist, you need to have the basics of being able to draw, to be able to convey a certain scene in a very basic format of drawing, but to be able to convey that to anyone else who looks at that and goes, oh, okay, I understand sort of what's going on. Moving forward to a modeler, you need to have the basic understanding of sort of the anatomy of the of characters, of animals. I would recommend you to study whatever department you're going for. Try to understand the basics of it. So if it's compositing requires you to have basic understandings of light composition and visual aesthetics, and understanding how layering works. And so these are some elements, for every industry, every department, you'll require those very basic understandings to be able to progress forward in them.
Yeah, that's great. And there's another more specific question, but on the same topic, I would say, is like, is there any specific skills you need to have to get into AMG studio to be 2D artist? I think you have some people who want to work for you already in Moscow.
Great.
Darina, for questions.
For us, it really comes down to how you're able to visualize a certain, a certain theme. So, for instance, we look for someone that has that artistic eye, that isn't afraid to be bold, isn't afraid to try different. If you're talking specifically about 2D or drawing or storyboard or concept artists, we look for individuals that are passionate. So they've dived in, they've created various different works that, whether they've worked or they haven't, they're not afraid to put them out there. So if you want to work for a company like us, I would recommend you to reach out. Don't be shy. Show us your work. And we're more than happy to sit down, discuss with you. Or right now, what we're actually providing are some training from our educational division. We're beginning to create some training material and training courses that we usually put our artists through in order to get them ready for these visual, very hyper-real sort of visual effects projects.
Wow. Where are they going to be available?
They'll be available shortly. We're right now working with our internal team, and we're generating these courses specifically for the Russian market.
Wow.
So
Great.
we will be releasing them shortly to the general public. But yeah, don't be shy, reach out. The worst thing that can happen is we would tell you perhaps you're not ready right now, but we will put you in touch with the correct individuals or correct teams that will upskill you so that you're ready to take on the works that we have. So, yeah.
Let's the journey begin. That's it.
Just go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you for answering. And Darina, please write down if it was just what you wanted to hear. And Galina is asked, where should I upload my portfolio? And there is advice from Ilya. It says ArtStation. Maybe you have more options for them.
ArtStation is a great place to do it. But again, so many social media platforms. Now you have Facebook, growing number of visual effects artists, and actually companies are hiring through Facebook as much as they're hiring through LinkedIn. So I know certain countries will have difficulty accessing certain social media platforms. So I'd advise you to create, for instance, Instagram is one way. Twitter, not Twitter. There's TikTok now, or Twitter to some extent. You're able to upload certain amount of your work or get yourself involved in certain discussions. I know, for instance, there's one example I can give where an individual created some artwork for Alien Prometheus, the second film that was coming out. And he heard about the film sort of being in the works, and he began creating some sketches on Instagram and on Twitter, and he put them out there, and he tagged the right production companies. He did the right tags in there. So the production company saw this and they were quite inspired by his work, and they managed to actually hire him directly because of the work he uploaded based on that project. So I would say sometimes the best way to get involved in projects is to do some background research on certain studios, what they're developing. Usually studios announce on their social media that they are beginning to work on a certain film. What you can do, regardless whether you're a 2D artist, concept artist, or you're a 3D artist, you can begin putting together some elements that can capture these studios' attention. And yeah, that'll be definitely one way to do this.
Capture attention. I love that. Yes, for sure. Thank you. And what is the age limits? Anton asked, like, at what age is not too late to study 3D?
There is no age limit. I mean, I've worked with individuals, for instance, at Animal Logic, we've worked with young, 18, sometimes 17-year-olds who dedicated a long period of their early young life to just learning visual effects or programming, and or they jump onto sort of the educational classes that are set by many of these bigger studios, and then they recruit these individuals to work on bigger projects, all the way to I've met 56-year-old individual, and he had recently changed careers completely. He went from he had various different roles in his past life, but a creative role was something he'd always wanted to do, and visual effects was a great inspiration for him. So at 55, he began training, and at 56, he was already working on some of big studios, and he got himself in. So there is no age limit. I think if you're passionate about something, and especially after COVID, many people are changing their industries, many professions that they've been doing. There's no better time than now. So jump onto it. Yeah.
No better time than now, for sure. Thank you. And Evgeny asks, are there any famous or not famous 3D generalists or other artists in this industry that you inspired by? And maybe you can name them. He wants to read some biographies.
Sure. Actually, I'm working with one of the individual. I mean, he's my partner, my business partner, and we've grown AMG together. His name is Hashem Al-Shayer. He has been he's our chief content officer, as well as our co-founder. And he was also the managing partner and content creation management manager at CMI VFX, which was an educational platform for visual effects for the past 20 years. They were the leading visual effects training company. He has inspired me immensely to create to where we are now, to pushing me to many feats that I have achieved. He's one for sure. Another individual is Louis Pages. He was my mentor at the very beginning, early stages of my career. Phenomenal artist, phenomenal visual effects supervisor, and an all-around great general person. These two individuals have inspired me through my career heavily. I mean, there are countless amounts of other artists that I can go through, but in terms of who really stood out with these two, yeah, I mean there are many, but I would, if you want to really understand big people, I would start with these two, and they would lead you to many other artists that you will identify as well.
That's great, dear friends. If you couldn't recognize the name, I found them, so I will send you in the chat, and if you want to read. And it says, oh, Artyom, of course. I knew he's going to ask again. So it was in the comments, he said that after he will finish a few big projects, he wants to open his own studio in Russia. So he wants to know from you, how did you open your own studio? And what was the challenges that you faced?
Right. Well, I mean, that's great if you're going to do that. I would
Yeah.
say the challenges you may face are getting yourself initially onto the ground, getting yourself a project that you will require a large team or a team in specific, and having a project like that will really help you build your studio, and it will pass the way for you to build a great studio. Because once you have a big enough project to have maybe 10 or 20 artists or 30 artists with you, it falls into a one after another, like a dominoes effect, kind of. Another thing I would say is having access to powerful workstations, having networking. Like any other industry, without the right networks, you won't climb the ladder as effectively as you think you would. So building right connections, talking to the right studios or production houses, being able to sell yourself or your studio. One of the things I would say is focus on a niche. Focus on your team initially to focus on one niche, whether that's animation, whether that's effects, whether that's lighting. Make it about that. Initially, you can expand your horizons, you can expand your team to do much larger. But when you start there, companies usually look for teams to handle certain events, certain things. And if you can do that and you can sell yourself well, then you have a great prosperous company and growing company.
Yeah, start with little. Yeah, the art of little steps. Thank you.
Yeah.
And dear friends, we run out of time, to be honest, but we're gonna answer 2 more questions.
Sure.
And it's an interesting one. Roman asked, "Can we open franchise of your studio?" And under the conduct of your specialist. I love that. That's brave.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we are open. But we are absolutely open to all conversations. If you something you want to discuss with us, please reach out. You have our information here, and I'm sure the information has been passed around. Reach out to us, speak to us. We are always looking for new partners, especially after COVID. We want to give people more opportunities to get involved in this industry or to expand their own teams. And if it's something that we can help with our brand, then let's talk. So
Talk.
that's great. Very brave. I like that.
Very brave.
That's very bold. Very good.
Forward, blunt. There you go. And Maxime asks, what they want to really want to know your vision. He says, I want to know Poya's vision on industry of CG in 10 years.
Right. That's a great question, Max. The industry is evolving rapidly. With the introduction of virtual production, with the introduction of Unreal Engine, and artificial intelligence integration with all of these, the next 10 years for visual effects looks like a sci-fi movie to an essence. There are many components, many departments that are going to get replaced by the capability of what artificial intelligence is going to be able to do. We've already seen animation, many animation features, many animation tools that are AI generated. You look at a company like Ziva, where they're able to feed their systems with various different footage, and it's able to create hyper realistic movements of characters depending on what it is that you fed into it. It's able to generate muscle, skeleton, and tissue on a whim, so you don't need an artist to do that anymore. Many of the animation segments are being replaced by automated systems now, and I don't see why this wouldn't expand into many other departments as well. I think the visual effects pipeline itself is evolving because of the virtual production and Unreal. It's becoming more streamlined, it's becoming quicker, it's becoming faster. We have stronger processors now that we ever had, so expect larger films. Films in general are going to be evolving an example I can give to you of something that's been developing in the backgrounds of films is AI generated scripts and AI generated works and films. So
Wow.
it's a very evolving industry. I mean, when I initially joined this industry 11 years ago now, 11, 12 years ago now, it was similar, but it was almost quite different in terms of the environment was quite different. Now it's a whole nother environment and it's constantly changing. So it's a changing landscape. To say where it will be in 10 years, it's very much a sci-fi, what you can imagine of a sci-fi sort of where we'll be reaching in those. Yeah. So that's kind of my answer for where we'll be in 10 years.
Yeah, yeah, and we're already one step there. It's like Alita Battle Angel. It's made completely with like there's no human in this movie, and there are a few others like that. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there will always be human involvement, but I think there'll be more human and machine integration with the capabilities that virtual reality and augmented reality and mixed reality enable movie makers to achieve even bigger feats, even bigger types of production. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So we're almost done. We're just going to summarize a bit. Galina asked if we will have any training courses from you on Skillbox, or where we need to look for these kind of works, that we will do.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I'd love to provide some tutorials on Skillbox for sure, and
Wow.
on our
Great.
own platforms as well. So hopefully there'll be a collaboration between us, and moving forward we can provide many tutorials. So absolutely.
Wow. Nice. So we're gonna wait with our patient.
Yeah.
We just will wait. And so I will answer another question. It says, is there opportunities about Skillbox to work on real projects in diploma when you work on your diploma? Yes, Galina, at the end of your education in Skillbox, you work on real project, and for sure, if it will be CG-Industry, you will work on real project. And yes, this door is open. That's what she asks. Like, is this open?
Great.
Yes, it's open for you. And more questions you can ask, the managers. Thank you so much, dear friends, for your great questions. Poya, thank you for your patience with us and your incredible answers. Thank you.
Great.
And
thank you.
Hopefully we'll come back again later.
Yes, definitely. I'll look to see everyone soon. And thank you all for your paying attention to this presentation. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow.